It was a dark night. In the village, everyone was already asleep, but Michael sat under a large old oak tree, lost in thought. The young man had recently turned 23, and he had one more year left at medical school. It was hard for him to believe that soon his cherished dream would come true. He would become a cardiothoracic surgeon. What sparked his passion for medicine? No one in his family knew, but since childhood, Michael loved reading books about various diseases and the human body. In school, his favorite subjects were chemistry and biology. Michael's parents, Mr. Brian Fox and Mrs. Diana Fox, were ordinary people. They had grown up and spent their entire lives in Bakersville, working for the local agro firm. Mr. Brian Fox operated a tractor, while Mrs. Diana Fox worked as a milking machine operator. The Fox were very simple, unremarkable people. They worked, raised their only son, and thought he would follow in their footsteps, stay in the village, get married, and give them grandchildren. They even found a potential bride for him, or rather, Diana did. She believed that Michael couldn't take a step without her and decided everything for him in advance. This didn't sit well with Michael. He had told his mom multiple times that he would make his own decisions, but the stubborn woman didn't listen to her adult son. In her eyes, Michael remained a little inexperienced boy. Brian often hinted to his wife that excessive coddling of Michael would lead to no good. But she didn't listen to her husband either, and continued to do things her own way. She wanted to connect with their neighbors, Melinda and Ed Brody, by marrying Michael to their daughter, Kelly. The Brodys owned a large farm and produced their own branded products. The Brody family were also from humble beginnings. However, Ed managed to strike a deal at the right time and open his own farming business. Michael marrying Kelly. That's when we'll live well, Diana told her husband. And she's so beautiful. Blonde, thick hair, tall and graceful. Michael won't find a girl like her anywhere else. And I've heard she really likes our Michael. All summer, she's been trying to get close to him, but he doesn't notice. Calm down, woman, Brian said to his wife. Our son is a smart guy, and he'll decide for himself. Can't you see he's not interested in Kelly? He's got someone else on his mind. Who's that? Well, tell me, who has caught our son's eye? Diana asked. You can ask him yourself. The holidays will be over soon. Michael will leave in a week, Brian replied. Rushing to Michael's room, Diana realized he wasn't home. It was almost midnight. She looked into the yard through the open window and didn't have to search for long. Michael was sitting on a bench, attentively watching his mother. I'm here, Mom. Just wanted to breathe some fresh air, he said. Don't sit there for too long. You'll catch a cold. It's almost autumn, and nights are getting cool, his mother said. Or maybe you're waiting for someone. Maybe Kelly. Mom, how many times do I have to say it? I don't need your Kelly. I didn't like her since school. She's slippery and intrusive. That's just your imagination, son, Diana said. Look at her. A beauty. The first beauty in the village. That's who you should marry. Realizing he couldn't change his mother's mind, Michael didn't argue with her. He just sighed, got up, and walked towards the house. In the future doctor's mind, there was a completely different girl. The one he had been thinking about day and night lately. Morning arrived unnoticed. Michael usually woke up around 10, a luxury he could afford only during holidays. Throughout the school year, he rose very early due to the demanding schedule of medical school. Despite the time and energy it consumed, Michael enjoyed his studies. Michael, are you still sleeping? A friend's voice made Michael jump out of bed and approach the window. Come on, get up. Look at the fish I caught this morning. Inviting you to join me. But you keep refusing. All right, Shane, I swear I'll be on the shore with you tomorrow for sure, Michael said. Come on in. Let's have breakfast together. Shane entered the house. As usual, Diana had left breakfast on the table before heading to work. Today, she decided to treat her beloved son with an omelette and cheesy rolls. "Well, this is delicious," Shane exclaimed. "Shane, are you planning to go to college? It's been so many years since high school, and you're still tinkering in your workshop." Michael asked. "Why do I need that?" Shane replied. "I can earn without education. My workshop is doing fine. I have regular clients. I'm never out of work. Ever since I returned from the army, I've been repairing cars. That's what I've always wanted." "That's what you always wanted? To become a scientist?" "Well, not a scientist, but a doctor for sure," Michael said. "You know, I think it's the most humane profession in the world. Healing, saving, helping people. That's true happiness. I'm about to become a cardiothoracic surgeon soon. I'll go through residency, practice, and then I'll start fixing people's engines myself." "Brother, we're alike in that." Shane winked. "I repair car engines. You fix human ones. You can't even imagine what a human heart is like," Michael said. "It's the main organ of the human body. People often don't even think about it, but their entire life depends on it. I'm most interested in heart transplantation. It's a whole separate science. But medicine has advanced so much now that soon these surgeries won't surprise anyone." "How come?" "At first find a person willing to share their heart," Shane remarked. "In life, various situations happen. Sometimes a person gets injured, leaves this world, but their heart is healthy. That's when they transplant such organs to patients in need," Michael explained. "You might as well say you'd sacrifice your own heart," Shane said. "Why not? I wouldn't mind. Although, you know, I want to live beyond imagination." Michael jokingly redirected the conversation. "Well, okay, we can chat with you all day. You tell some interesting things." Shane began to get ready to head home. "You need to be ready by 5 a.m. tomorrow. The catch begins early in the morning." The young men agreed to meet at the riverbank, and Shane went about his business. Meanwhile, Michael washed the dishes and picked up a book. But instead of reading, Gwen Turner, the daughter of the local literature teacher, occupied Michael's thoughts. Gwen, the only daughter of Mrs. Turner, had a strong desire to attend college and obtain a history teacher's diploma. She enrolled in the local college and never left her mother unattended for a single day. Mrs. Turner had kidney issues and was almost incapable of taking care of herself. Gwen was excellent at sewing, earning her livelihood through it. The earnings barely covered their expenses, but they were not ones to complain. Gwen had learned to combat difficulties from a young age. Short, red-haired, with freckles, she often faced mockery from her classmates. In the 6th grade, she cut her own hair and decided to dye it black. But her mother noticed her daughter's whims in time and explained that everyone has their unique beauty. Of course, Gwen didn't believe her words, but remembered them and often repeated them. She felt that with age, she was becoming more and more unattractive. "Mom, why did you give birth to me like this?" Gwen said to her mother, studying her reflection in the mirror. "I'm so short. And these freckles, what should I do with them? They can't be erased or covered up. How many times do I have to tell you that you are beautiful? Your hair shimmers like copper in the sun, down to your waist. And about height, your father always said that a girl shouldn't be tall for a man to carry her. And I'm not tall either," Mrs. Turner said. "Did Dad carry you on his arms?" Gwen asked. "Of course, he did," Gloria sighed sadly. "If he were alive, he would confirm my words now. But boys still don't pay attention to me," the girl said. "That means the one who can truly appreciate your beauty hasn't appeared yet. Don't fill your head with nonsense. There will be someone who will love you, and you'll love them. You'll see. That's how it will be." The mother reassured her daughter. "Ah, if only that were really true." Gwen sighed softly. 2 years passed since that conversation, and such a person was found. Michael ran into Gwen by chance on the street. She was heading to the store, lost in thought, and bumped into him. Michael and Gwen went to the same school, but he remembered her poorly, probably due to a 5-year age difference. Gwen turned 18 in April. Seeing her, Michael immediately noticed her modest, kind gaze, soft voice, and beautiful smile. "Sorry, I'm so clumsy," Gwen said. "I'm walking, not paying attention to anyone else on the road." "Yes, I'm also at fault, walking and looking around. I'm Michael. And you?" "I'm Gwen, Mrs. Turner's daughter," the girl said. "Mrs. Turner? The one who taught literature at school?" Michael asked. "Yes, but she doesn't work anymore. Her health has really deteriorated. I'm worried about her a lot," Gwen sighed. "Gwen, come to the pond shore around 11 p.m. today. You know where the big willow grows," Michael suggested. Gwen thought for a moment, smiled faintly, and walked away. In the evening, she came to the old willow, and since then, the young people met almost every night. Michael, knowing his mother's character, decided not to tell her anything for now. There was a week left of vacation. Michael, of course, wanted Gwen to go to the city with him, but he understood that talking about it was pointless. The girl would never agree to leave her mother. "What are you thinking about, Michael?" A female voice brought the young man back to reality. Kelly stood in front of him. She clearly didn't come just by chance. It was evident from her appearance. Short dress, loose hair, and makeup. But Michael didn't care. "Oh, it's you, Kelly. Why did you come?" the young man asked, not very politely. "Well, why so rude?" Kelly asked playfully, sitting next to him. "I just missed you." "Yes, and your mom asked you to visit. And how about going to a party tonight? You can have a good time there. A new cafe recently opened. We can sit, chat, eat delicious food, and drink. By the way, what do you prefer to drink?" "I like champagne." "I prefer to drink champagne only on a significant occasion. Otherwise, I love black tea with lemon and water." Michael replied, a bit annoyed. "Michael, have you always been such a killjoy?" the girl said. "Tell me, are you not interested in girls? Maybe you have other interests in this regard. You won't be able to hide your secret for long." "Kelly, one more word, and I'll chase you away from here." Michael couldn't bait. "My relationships with girls have nothing to do with you. And overall, if you want to know, you are not my type." "Oh, really?" Kelly blushed with indignation. "You'll regret saying these words to me. You'll come to me yourself, begging for forgiveness on your knees, but it will be too late. I love you, you understand? I love you. And there's nothing I can do about it." "Kelly, stop humiliating yourself," Michael said. "Why do you need me? There are so many normal guys around." "You just said I'm abnormal." "Forgive me, Michael," Kelly cried. "I said it out of anger. Know that you're the coolest guy I know, and you'll still be mine. Don't resist." The girl glanced into Michael's eyes once again and walked towards her home. "We even live next door," he said, sighing. "I'm tired of all this circus. No matter what you say, the result is the same. Tears, plaintive looks, empty hopes." The day passed unnoticed. Michael helped his parents with the farm, went swimming in the lake, and eagerly awaited his meeting with his beloved. It seemed to him that since he started dating Gwen, the world had become more vibrant for him. He began to breathe differently and look at life more optimistically. He immediately realized that Gwen was a serious and intelligent girl. Moreover, she was very kind and trusting. "There's no one else in the world like you," he often told Gwen. "You are the most beautiful, the most wonderful. I feel so good next to you." And Gwen would freeze with happiness, tightly hugging her beloved. It seemed that there would be no end to their cloudless happiness. None of them knew what awaited them ahead, but the hope for the best helped them live and cherish every moment. Richard arrived at his home. He intended to climb to his apartment on the 3rd floor using the stairs, but feeling a heaviness in his chest, he decided to use the elevator. Unpleasant sensations had been accompanying him for several months, but the businessman hadn't found time to consult a doctor. Once in the apartment, he carefully took off his shoes and unbuttoned his shirt collar. After resting for about 20 minutes on the couch, Richard took a shower and went to bed. The apartment was neatly arranged. Every Wednesday, a cleaning lady came to tidy up. A fresh summer breeze rustled the curtains. Through the open window, the sounds of passing cars could be heard. Soon, the man drifted off to sleep. Richard slept almost dreamlessly. Fatigue and the strain of a day's work contributed to a deep slumber. The alarm rang precisely at 6 a.m. With difficulty, opening his eyes, Richard got out of bed and once again felt the unpleasant sensations in his chest and between his shoulder blades. No doubt, it's time to see a doctor, he reminded himself. Took a shower, got dressed, had a cup of coffee, and rushed to work. As usual, he didn't think about the doctor's visit throughout the day. "Michael, when will you come now?" Gwen asked suddenly, hugging her beloved. "I just don't want you to leave." "I don't want to either," Michael said, kissing the girl. "But I have to. I dream of getting my diploma and starting to work. Once I start earning money, I'll move you and Mom to the city. But for now, I can't. I hope it happens soon." Gwen sighed and discreetly wiped away a tear. "I never thought I could be so happy to have a guy like you. Why didn't you think so?" Michael wondered. Every girl dreams of finding her love and getting married. Every girl, Gwen whispered and sighed. "But not me. I know I'm not pretty, with red hair and freckles." "Oh, stop it right now. Don't talk about yourself like that. Remember, you're the most beautiful. You have the most beautiful red hair, green eyes, and a smile. I love you. Do you hear me? Love you. And I'll never stop loving you." Gwen didn't respond to her beloved's words, just smiled and kissed him on the cheek. "I love you too. More than life. I love you," she whispered, hardly believing her happiness. The young couple sat under the old willow tree until almost 2 in the morning. They knew they wouldn't be able to see each other as often as they would like, so they tried to remember every moment spent together. "Tomorrow, I'll tell my mom about you. I think she'll approve of my choice," the girl said before going home. "All right. Then I will too," the young man whispered in response. "My mom's character is not the best, but she won't be able to do anything. I made my choice. In a year, we'll get married, and we'll move to the city. Just endure a little longer." Not much time left. From these words, Gwen felt somewhat uneasy. It was as if she sensed that something unpleasant was about to happen. However, she tried not to reveal her mood, kissed Michael, and went into the house. On the contrary, the young man became inspired and firmly decided to talk to his parents about Gwen. He wasn't afraid of his father's reaction, knowing that his dad would agree with any of his choices. But his mother, the conversation would be tough. Yet delaying it made no sense anymore. "Well, 3 more days, and you'll leave your home." Diana busied herself in the kitchen that morning, trying to prepare something especially delicious to, once again, bring up the topic of Kelly with her son. She didn't lose hope that her son would come to his senses and see the neighbor beauty in a different light. The idea of marrying the young couple had become obsessive for Diana. As fate would have it, the Fox couple had only one son. Diana fell ill after difficult childbirth, took a long time to recover, but could never conceive again. Perhaps that's why she guarded her only son so much, not realizing that Michael had long since grown up. Michael was tired of his mother's overprotectiveness, but he loved her and didn't want to hurt or offend her. Mom, you're just a wizard," Michael said, waking up from the amazing smell of fresh baking. "Do we have a celebration today?" "I always have a celebration when I'm with you," the woman replied, looking at her son lovingly. "I have the day off today, so I decided to treat you. You'll leave soon, and we haven't had a heart-to-heart talk yet." "Don't exaggerate, Mom. We talk almost every day. I never exaggerate, and I wish only the best for you. So don't interrupt me and listen carefully." Diana said, "I've told you more than once that you won't find a better match than Kelly Brody. Look at the house her father is building for her. Ed is getting richer by the day. They say they're planning to buy a luxurious apartment for their daughter in the city. If you marry Kelly, I'll be at peace about your future. Let me take care of my future on my own." "Mom," Michael interrupted, "do you really think I would marry Kelly just for some apartment? How wrong you are about me." "Mom, I'm almost a doctor. Soon I'll start earning, and I'll buy my own place. And I'll choose a wife for myself, someone with whom I want to spend my entire life." Michael almost choked with indignation. "I've wanted to tell you for a long time that I'm in love with another girl, and I intend to marry her. I don't need Kelly. She's silly, intrusive, and overall." Michael couldn't find words out of anger. It seemed like he was on the verge of breaking down, packing his things, and running away from his parents' home. "Who is she? Confess right now," demanded Diana. "I really want to know what daughter-in-law you've chosen for me." "I've chosen a wife for myself first," he replied. "You know her well. It's Gwen Turner." "Turner?" Diana even sat down in surprise at the unexpected news. Her hands trembled, and her chin too. She tried to say something, but it took a moment. "Mom, are you okay?" Michael worried. "Let me check your blood pressure." "Nothing's needed," Diana croaked. "I want some fresh air." I didn't expect such a surprise. "So, this red-headed fool is going to be my daughter-in-law. But how can this be? My son, my handsome boy, and this monster, the same monster as her mother." Rocking back and forth, Diana went outside, muttering something to herself, and disappeared somewhere. Michael, bewildered, stood in the middle of the yard, watching his mother. She returned only an hour and a half later. Surprisingly, her mood had improved. She spoke calmly with her son. Only a slight tremor in her hands revealed her nervousness. In the evening, Michael told his father everything. Since his mother wasn't home, the men could have a heart-to-heart talk. "I suspected for a long time that you've met someone," Brian said, looking at his son. "Otherwise, where else would you disappear every night?" "But what were you going to say, Dad?" Michael asked, looking at him. Brian sighed deeply, raised his eyes to the sky, and seemed to forget where he was for a while. "You don't know about this, and you shouldn't have known." The man finally continued his story. "Before I married Diana, I was in love with Gwen's mother, Gloria. The whole Bakersville knew how I felt about this girl. Your mother knew, too. It seemed like Gloria liked me back. She didn't immediately refuse my proposal of marriage. She promised to think about it, but in the end, she declined. Said she loved someone else and didn't need anyone but him. That's the story, son." "So, that's why Mom reacted like that to the news about Gwen," Michael guessed. "I never expected her to feel so bad about my words." "Yes, she always hated Gloria, although I've never given her any reason to be jealous all my life. Can you imagine how she feels now, thinking that Gloria will become her sister-in-law?" "But she calmed down later, managed to pull herself together," Michael said. "It's unclear what's on these women's minds." Brian replied, "I've lived a long life, and I still can't fully understand them. I approve of your choice. Gwen takes after her mother. She'll be a good girl and an excellent wife for you." The next 2 days went smoothly for Michael. Diana tried to act as calmly as possible, as if nothing had happened. She didn't reproach her husband for anything. Gwen, as promised, also told her mother everything. "You know, when Mom heard about us, she got a little nervous but approved of my choice. She said to Michael, she considers you a good and honest person, so there won't be any obstacles from her side." Gwen smiled at Michael, whose eyes were tense with thoughts, and she couldn't understand what was happening with him. "That's great, Gwen. Very good," he replied. "My mom understands everything too, and I think she'll soon come to terms with my choice. It's never easy with her. Don't worry. We'll get married and move to the city right away. You won't have to live under the same roof with her. Let's not talk about it," the girl pleaded. "Our wedding is still a long way official. Who knows what might happen during that time?" Gwen whispered. For several days, she had felt that something had to happen, but she didn't know what exactly. This night, the young couple spent together until dawn. Of course, Michael promised to visit at the first opportunity. Gwen knew she would eagerly anticipate those meetings because no video calls, social networks, or messengers could replace face-to-face communication. Michael escorted the girl home as the daylight started to break. Gwen decided not to go with him to make it easier for her. Embracing her beloved once again, Gwen ran into the house and only then let herself cry. She held back the tears with all her might not to reveal her mood to Michael. "Why are you crying? It'll only be a week, and Michael will come to you on weekends." Gloria, Gwen's mother, tried to comfort her. "I don't know, Mom. Something doesn't feel right. I feel like something is about to happen, but I can't figure out what exactly," Gwen whispered, wiping away tears. Gloria continued to reassure her daughter until she fell asleep. Brian saw that his son returned at 6 in the morning, so he decided to let him rest. The bus was leaving at 8. The boy could sleep in. "I'll see him off to the station myself," he decided, and informed his wife about it. Diana had already been awake for a long time, bustling around the stove, preparing food for her son's journey. "Took a day off from work today," Diana explained to her husband. "I'll see our son off and then take care of other household chores. I'll make jam to spoil Michael later." "Diana, our son has been an adult for a long time," Brian reminded his wife. "How much longer can we talk about him as if he were a 3-year-old child?" Diana didn't react to her husband's words. "What are you standing here for? You said you wanted to start your car," she replied to Brian. "Go and don't get in the way." The man silently shrugged and walked into the yard. Lost in his thoughts, Brian tried to start his car, but the engine of the old vehicle refused to cooperate. After struggling in the garage for about 20 minutes without any success, Brian waved his hand at the car and went to wake up his son. The wall clock showed 8:20. "Michael, wake up." Brian began shaking his son's shoulder. "I thought it would be better for you to get some sleep before the journey. And look what happened. The bus has already left, and I couldn't start the car. I don't know when you'll get to the station. What time is your train?" "It's at noon," Michael replied to his father, rubbing his eyes. "No ride, you say? Well, we need to find out who's going to the city today. I have classes tomorrow." Jumping out of bed, Michael hurried to the bathroom, washed up, tidied himself, and called Shane. Shane arrived within 15 minutes and went under the hood of the old car. "It's bad," he delivered his verdict. "Everything here can only be fixed with special tools, and it's not a one-day job." "What do we do now?" "We'll have to look for a ride." "Oh well, just hope not to be late for the train," Michael said, unexpectedly spotting Kelly. "Why look, the ride is already up and waiting for the future doctor," she said, smiling at the men. "Meaning, what?" Michael didn't immediately understand. Just like this, the girl approached Michael, took him by the hand. "My father is going to the city today, so you don't need any train. If you're quick, you can take a seat in his luxurious car." After some thought, Michael agreed to the girl's offer. It turned out that Kelly was also heading to the city. Michael loaded his luggage into the trunk, sat in the back seat, assuming Kelly would take the front seat next to her father. But no, right after Michael entered the car, the girl sat next to him. Michael's parents watched all of this attentively. Brian nodded silently, and Diana was incredibly happy about what was happening. Without making them wait too long, Mr. Brody took the wheel and started moving. Michael waved goodbye to his parents, observing how they gradually became distant. still bidding farewell to their only and beloved son. When the Jeep turned the corner of the street where his childhood and youth passed, Michael turned away from the girl and began to observe what could be seen from the car window. Green trees were beginning to turn yellow. Summer has passed. Soon, the rains will come. It will become gloomy and chilly. Strange, as long as I can remember. I never liked autumn, and Gwen loves it, Michael thought. And how does she manage to see the good in any weather? Gwen had a unique influence on Michael. He felt changes within himself. For instance, now he could spend hours in solitude, whereas before, he struggled with loneliness. He began to notice the beauty of nature in a special way and contemplate life. The seemingly unremarkable girl attracted Michael like a magnet. Now, the young man was completely convinced that Gwen was his destiny. "Michael, why are you sitting there like a stranger?" Kelly's voice made the young man remember where he was and distracted him from thoughts about his beloved. "Who are you thinking about? Confess." Kelly touched Michael's shoulder and started flirting with him. He was uncomfortable with her touches and attempts to grab his attention. "I just didn't get enough sleep, Kelly," he replied with the first thing that came to mind. "Let's calmly get to the city. The road is not short." Michael crossed his arms over his chest, leaned his head back on the seat, and closed his eyes, hoping that Kelly would stop bothering him this way. But exactly at that moment, Gwen's name lit up on his phone screen. "Yes, I'm listening," Michael answered, trying not to mention the girl's name, feeling that Kelly didn't need to know about Gwen. "I'm on my way. You know, Dad's car didn't start, and Mr. Brody, our neighbor, happened to plan a trip to the city today. So, I'm going with him. I'll be there in a couple of hours, and I'll call you back." After exchanging a few more words with his beloved, Michael turned off the phone and immediately felt Kelly's curious gaze on him. "Well, confess. Who were you talking to?" she asked. "Tell me. Do I know her? Is she better than me? Prettier than me?" "Kelly, stop bothering Michael." Her father couldn't resist and interfered, realizing that his daughter was crossing some boundaries. "Oh, don't tell. But just so you know, the person Michael was talking to is just an ugly creature compared to me." "Dad, stop the car. I don't want to go anywhere anymore. Drop me off right here." "Kelly, have you completely lost your mind?" Her father began to calm her down, parking by the side of the road. "I have absolutely no time to deal with you. Get out. We need to talk." Kelly got out of the car. Mr. Brody took her aside and started explaining something. Michael didn't like eavesdropping on others' conversations, but today's situation had exhausted him. He slightly lowered the car window and understood that the father and daughter were talking about him. "How much longer will you humiliate yourself in front of Michael? Where is your pride? And why did I listen to you?" Mr. Brody was questioning, holding his daughter by the elbow. Kelly tried to break free from her father's grip, but she couldn't, which made her even angrier. Michael felt awkward witnessing this whole scene. Yet, he couldn't find a way out of the situation. On both sides of the road, there was only forest. The nearest settlement was far away. Therefore, Michael had no choice but to wait for their return to the car. They didn't keep them waiting for long. Mr. Brody silently placed his daughter in the front seat next to him, started the car, and continued driving. None of them spoke a word until they reached the necessary stop. Michael thanked Mr. Brody for the comfortable and fast ride, and finally got out of the car. The young man had been eagerly awaiting this moment. Being in the same car with Kelly and her father was extremely unpleasant for him. "Well, take care of yourself," Mr. Brody said, shaking Michael's hand and abruptly pulling away from the parking spot. Kelly turned away from her father and pretended to be watching someone on the other side of the street. She didn't say a word in farewell to Michael. September came. Classes, lectures, and practical sessions started. Michael called Gwen every day, eagerly anticipating their meeting. 3 weeks passed unnoticed. Michael couldn't break away from his studies. Even on weekends, he struggled to find free time. The final year at medical school turned out to be challenging. But the young couple didn't lose heart. They knew that distance was no obstacle to their love. "Richard, how could you let yourself get to this state?" the doctor asked, jotting something down in the medical chart. "Don't you realize that joking with the heart is a bad idea? You were brought in today in a pre-heart attack condition." Dr. Talmans, "Of course, I am to blame for what happened." The man tried to justify himself. Matters don't wait. Every day I'm in care. Everything needs to be handled, solved, redone. You have only one life. If you continue to neglect your health like this, I can't guarantee that in the future you will not only be able to work, but also live," the doctor said. These words made Richard uneasy. He had long known that he needed to have his heart checked. He felt that it sometimes pounded as if it were about to jump out of his chest. But he didn't rush to the doctors. But this morning, he felt so bad that he had to call an ambulance. And now the doctor is saying such horrible things. "Tomorrow you must definitely undergo all examinations. I am completely dissatisfied with what the electrocardiogram showed today. And you'll also have to take all these tests," the doctor said, handing Richard a bunch of papers. "And no thoughts about home and work. Forget about all the affairs for a while." Richard obediently nodded and sighed. It was not easy for him, a young and energetic businessman, to come to terms with the fact that he would have to swallow bitter pills, undergo procedures, and listen to the doctor's instructions in the near future. Until now, he thought he was immortal, that if he ever encountered diseases, it would only be in old age. "Tell me, Richard, did your relatives suffer from heart diseases?" the doctor asked. "Yes, my father died at the age of 50 from a heart attack," the man replied. "That's not good," sighed Dr. Tolman. "You know, many diseases of parents are passed on to their children. Were you never told in childhood that you might have heart problems?" "No," said Richard. "Until recently, I felt fine." "Well, rest for now. It's too early to draw any conclusions. We'll do all the necessary tests, and only then can we make a final diagnosis," explained the doctor, and left the room. Left alone, Richard seriously pondered the words of the attending physician. This morning, for the first time, he distinctly realized that he could die. He felt a pain in his chest that he had never experienced before. Today, lying in the ward and staring at the ceiling, he realized how terrifying it is to live life and leave no continuation behind. Until now, Richard had lived, postponing his personal life for later. It seemed that the time had not yet come to get married, become a father. At 35, the young man had completely different goals: to stand on his own, develop his business, live for himself, travel, and extract maximum benefit from everything around him. And it turned out that all of this was just a soap bubble. You can't earn all the money, and is it worth it? Richard thought, watching as the liquid dripped slowly inside the transparent container of the four. It seems like I haven't even lived yet, and I'm already thinking about death. But what if I really won't make it? Many times I've heard the opinion that it's scary to leave little children as orphans. Now it seems to me that the only thing scarier is to leave no one behind. Today you exist, and tomorrow you are gone. There's nothing, just emptiness. And life, it continues in children. They are the meaning of life. God, if you give me a chance, if I still pull through and recover, I promise to get married, start a family, have children, and live only for them. My mother has long wanted grandchildren, and I always found excuses and justifications. But where to find a girl who can win my heart? I've met many, but there hasn't been one with whom I would want to connect my destiny." Lost in such thoughts, Richard unknowingly fell asleep. The next day in the hospital turned out to be truly hot. Endless examinations and tests were exhausting, but Richard held on. It seemed that the illness made him look anew at everything that was happening to him, And he also terribly wanted to live, fight for life, and recover. Waiting for the doctor's verdict was both oppressive and agonizing. Richard lay on the bed, trying not to think about anything bad, but he wasn't very successful at it. "What's wrong with you?" he addressed himself. "You, a man who many consider a business shark, lost your grip within the first day of being in the hospital." Richard tried to find a comfortable position to sleep, so that time wouldn't drag on for so long. But he couldn't find a comfortable position, and time was dragging. "Well, what can I tell you, Richard?" began the elderly doctor. "Mr. Tallman, speak the truth." "I want to know everything about my health," Richard interrupted the doctor. "I'm ready to listen to you and do everything to heal." You see, the doctor didn't know how to choose his words correctly. "Unfortunately, I can't bring you any good news. Your heart needs treatment, but I'm afraid we can't help you. It's exhausted. You have heart failure. You miraculously avoided a heart attack, but it's not excluded that attacks may continue. And the saddest part," Mr. Tallman fell silent. Before him lay not an elderly person, but a young ambitious man in the prime of his life, wanting to live, love, and enjoy every new day. "Don't be silent, doctor, please," Richard sighed. "The saddest part is that medicine is powerless in your case," the doctor said, and fell silent again. "An attack can occur at any moment. You must not get nervous, and physical exertion is also contraindicated." "But is there really no way out?" Richard asked. "There is a way out. Transplant," the doctor answered, and fell silent again. "Transplant of the heart? But that's a complex operation," exclaimed Richard, and sighed heavily again. "Such operations are rare, but still, during my medical practice, I've performed 3 such operations, and all of them were successful. My patients are alive, and to this day thank me for giving them a chance to work this earth, breathe the air, and enjoy everything around them. Because we often don't appreciate it, don't we? When a person goes through such operations, he becomes different, starts to look at many things with different eyes." The doctor spoke. "Well, I agree to such an operation," said Richard, realizing that he had no other chance anyway. "Wait," said the doctor. "It's not as simple as it seems to you. Firstly, such an operation costs a lot, about $120,000. And secondly, those willing to give their heart to another person, as you can guess, are not that many. Donors simply don't exist." "Money is not a problem," Richard whispered thoughtfully. "But about the donor, you are, of course, right. Not everything in this life can be bought with money. In any case, we will continue to treat you. We will do everything possible to prolong your life," said the doctor, and left Richard alone in the room. The ringing of the phone made the future doctor startle. After long and challenging study sessions, Michael decided to take a short break and fell into a deep sleep. He managed to sleep only a few minutes. The young man fumbled for the phone on the bedside table and, without opening his eyes, pressed the answer button. "Hello, I'm listening," he replied, completely unaware of the female voice speaking on the other end. "Michael, I'm sorry, but I couldn't not tell you about this." Kelly's voice was somewhat anxious. "Why are you silent? Didn't you recognize me?" "Kelly, is that you? Don't speak so quickly. I can't understand anything." Michael opened his eyes and listened attentively to the girl. "I'm going to tell you something now. You won't believe it. To prove it, I sent you photos in a private message. Take a look." The girl continued. "Speak clearly. What do you want to tell me?" Michael puzzled and started to get annoyed. "I found out who your girlfriend is. It's Gwen Turner. Only she turned out not to be as simple as she wanted to seem at first glance. You just left, and she's already having an affair with a newcomer builder. Have you heard that a team of builders arrived in Bakersville? So, your Gwen runs to them every day." At first, I didn't believe it, but then I decided to check whether it's true or not. It turned out to be true. Ask anyone in the village. Look at the photos and decide for yourself what to do next, Kelly said. Michael didn't respond to these words. For a few minutes, he sat on the bed in confusion, trying to process the information he had received. What was that? In any case, everything Kelly said cannot be true, Michael muttered, opening a page on a social network. In the messages, he found 2 photos, one of which showed Gwen in the arms of a guy he didn't know. In the other, she stood with her back, kissing this guy. Michael's eyes darkened at everything he saw. He didn't want to believe it, so he couldn't move for a long time. Just breathed deeply and grabbed his head. I have to do something. Maybe call. Michael fought and grabbed the phone. No. A phone call can only make everything worse. I believe Gwen. I just need to figure it out for myself. Kelly is lying. I'll find her and tell her everything I think about her. Michael rushed out of the apartment, not yet knowing what to do. It was 6 o'clock in the evening. The young man knew that the last bus to Bakersville, which he could take, had already left. The train would only be in the morning. As if sensing that something was happening with his friend. At that very moment, the name of his friend Shane lit up on the phone screen. Michael. Hey, how are you doing there? Shane inquired. I'm planning to go to the city for a couple of days. Thought maybe you could host me during that time. Yeah, sure, agreed Michael. But I'm actually heading to the village. Just really need to. Can you help? How can I get to Bakersville now? Why are you going to Bakersville at night? Shane wondered. It's really necessary, mumbled Michael, unsure how to explain the reason for his sudden trip. Listen, I have a friend in the city. I recently met him online. He's into car rentals. I can give you his phone number and address. Just have to drive yourself. Shane suggested. No problem. Michael rejoiced. I got my license 6 months ago. True, I don't have much driving experience, but I manage. Send me the address. About 40 minutes later, Michael stood at the doors of the designated office. Come in, invited the office owner. I'm Mr. Garfield. How can I help you? Hello. My name is Michael Fox. I'd like to rent a car from you, he said. I can offer you a few options. Did you bring your driver's license? Mr. Garfield asked. Yes, of course, replied Michael. After completing all the necessary paperwork, Michael followed Mr. Garfield to the car. A not-so-brand-new silver Mazda was waiting on the lot. Here's your car. Please return it. As we agreed, the day after tomorrow to the same spot, reminded Mr. Garfield. Handed the customer the documents and keys, and headed towards the office building. Michael sat in the car seat and shrugged awkwardly. He had very little driving experience. After getting his license, this was his first time behind the wheel. No worries. I'll remember how to do this. The young man encouraged himself and started the car. The master started quickly, turning the steering wheel left and right. Michael fastened his seatbelt, pressed the pedals, and carefully merged into traffic. Rush hour had begun in the city, and the speed of movement was minimal. In the right lane, Michael drove quietly, thinking about Gwen. The journey, barring any unforeseen events, should take about 8 hours. So, he should arrive in Bakersville around 4 a.m. An unexpected phone call interrupted Michael's thoughts. It was Shane. Well, did everything work out for you? He asked. Mr. Garfield said you've already left. Yeah, stuck in traffic. Trying to get out of the city. Michael chuckled. I'll be there around 4 a.m. I don't know what made you rush to Bakersville, but I'll meet you. Explain when you arrive, Shane said. Don't pass by the station. I'll be waiting. Michael was pleased that his friend cared about him and wanted to meet. Gradually, the speed on the road increased, and soon Michael was speeding along the wide highway. He thought about his beloved and believed that everything Kelly said was untrue. He just needed to understand the situation. Dusk fell. The reflections of oncoming cars blinded the inexperienced driver. Michael held the wheel tightly and firmly pressed the gas pedal. On top of everything, He was also very sleepy. Parking the car near a roadside cafe, he entered the warm and cozy interior, ordered coffee and a couple of sandwiches. The night outside was getting cold. Refreshed, the young man continued his journey. Michael turned on the radio and tried to think only positive thoughts. At 3 in the morning, he felt terribly sleepy. His eyes were sticking together, and his body was barely resisting sleep. But Michael knew he had only a little more to drive, and Shane had called, warning that he was waiting at the station. Nothing. A little more, and I'll be home. I'll get some sleep there. Michael reassured himself and kept driving. However, fatigue managed to distract the young man from the road for a few seconds. Just a few kilometers ahead, he didn't notice a truck pulling onto the road. Regaining consciousness at the last moment, Michael sharply turned the steering wheel to the right, veered off the road, and crashed into a pole. "Doctor, can you tell me if he'll be okay?" Shane couldn't remember how many times he had asked the doctor about his friend's condition. "I can't tell you anything yet. We're doing everything we can," replied the doctor, disappearing behind the doors of the operating room. Shane struggled to compose himself. When his friend didn't show up at the station as expected, he started calling Michael but received a message stating that the subscriber was out of the coverage area. Not knowing what to think, Shane called the hospital and learned about the car accident. The nurse explained that the Mazda driver was alive but in critical condition, prompting the doctors to proceed with surgery. Recognizing the car brand, Shane immediately understood that something terrible had happened to his friend. He couldn't recall how much time he spent near the operating room doors. Seeing the dawn outside the window indicated that Michael had been in surgery for about 4 hours. Unable to cope with his anxiety, Shane paced back and forth. Unexpectedly, 2 women and a man appeared at the end of the corridor. As they approached, the young man recognized Kelly, Diana, and Brian. Apparently, someone had informed them of what happened, and they came to the hospital together. "Shane, what are the doctors saying?" Diana rushed to him, her hands trembling, horror and pain reflected in her eyes. "Nothing is known yet. We have to wait," Shane replied. Diana cried. Brian silently sat on a chair and sighed, while Kelly turned away to the window, remaining silent. For a moment, Shane felt as if she carried a sense of guilt but was trying to hide it from others. What was Michael doing on the road at 4 in the morning? Brian asked. He usually always warns about his arrival, and now he decided to come behind the wheel of someone else's car. It seems like he was in a hurry. "I don't understand. What is happening?" Diana didn't respond to her husband's words and started crying again. Kelly turned away from the window, took a deep breath, and stared out again. Shane couldn't comprehend why she came to the hospital. As far as he knew, there was never anything between Kelly and Michael. Perhaps she decided to support her neighbors, but instead of offering support, she just stood by the window, as if she wasn't there at all. Maybe she truly loves Michael. That's why she came, Shane thought. Half an hour later, the operating room door opened. The weary surgeon wiped sweat from his forehead and approached Diana. "Are you the mother of the patient?" he asked. "Yes, I'm his mother, and this is his father," Diana mumbled, looking at the doctor with eyes swollen from tears. "We did everything we could. Michael is currently in a coma, and we don't know when he'll regain consciousness. Apparently, he was driving at a very high speed. Your son suffered a severe head injury. His organs are intact, but his limbs are broken. The main issue now is his head. I can't give you any guarantees that he'll wake up." The surgeon delivered the grim news. "But, doctor, is there really nothing more that can be done?" Diana pleaded with a desperate voice. "We have to wait. We'll keep observing him here. Transporting him to the city is currently extremely dangerous, but we'll do it eventually. Be patient," the doctor said, disappearing around the corner of the corridor. After the conversation with the doctor, Diana felt even worse. A nurse brought her a sedative. Brian held his wife's hand, barely standing on his own. Kelly continued to stare out the window, seemingly uninterested in everything happening around her. Shane thought that Kelly was in shock, attempted to talk to her several times, but she didn't respond. In the second half of the day, Gwen arrived at the hospital. Her pale gray face and sunken eyes indicated profound stress. Diana greeted her coldly, looked at her with hostility, as if she were an enemy. Kelly suddenly came to life, blaming Gwen for everything that happened to Michael. Gwen couldn't say anything in her defense. She looked at Kelly with a bewildered expression, unable to find words. A day passed, then another. Michael's condition remained critical. The decision was made to call in San Aviation and transfer him to the city hospital. Everyone left for the city except Gwen. She remained alone with her grief in Bakersville. She realized that her presence would only irritate Diana. There might have been another reason. In any case, Gwen decided to visit Michael in a week, refusing to entertain the thought that something irreversible might happen to him. In the city hospital, doctors re-examined Michael and concluded that he was unlikely to wake up. The head injury was incompatible with life. The heart was beating, but the brain wasn't functioning. A few days later, they raised the question of disconnecting the patient from life support equipment. Diana didn't immediately give a positive answer. She couldn't accept the fact that her only son was almost gone from this world. "Shane, it's so unfair," she said. "They say Michael is still alive, only thanks to the machines. But he wanted to live, just a bit more, and he could have become an excellent surgeon, treating people. Cardiovascular surgery was his dream. Even now, when he's almost gone, his heart continues to beat." "Diana, if there's nothing more we can do, would you consider leaving your son's healthy heart for someone who needs it?" Shane asked, posing an unexpected question. What are you saying?" Diana didn't understand. "I just remembered our conversation with Michael. Of course, it was a general discussion about life and the profession of a cardiothoracic surgeon." Shane began to explain, but Michael confidently said that he would be willing to donate his heart to someone in need. Can you imagine how much he loved his profession and people? Diana pondered his words. She had never even entertained such thoughts. And now Shane was telling her this. "My son will still need his heart. He will live. Do you hear?" Diana began to scream down the corridor, tears streaming down her face. Brian, who had been by her side all this time, struggled to calm his wife. When Diana was taken to the procedural room to receive a sedative injection, he sat down next to Shane and sighed heavily. "You're right, Shane," he said. "If this is Michael's fate, why not give someone else a chance at life?" A few more days passed, and Michael had no chances left. His condition worsened with each passing hour. There was no hope that he would come out of the coma. "Richard, I don't want to get your hopes up prematurely, but you have a chance for recovery," said the doctor when he visited his patient once again. "What do you mean?" Richard didn't understand immediately. "The thing is, a donor heart has become available. I didn't expect that we could find one so soon, but, well, it seems like fate wants to give you a chance at recovery," explained the doctor. "But, of course, we still need to check if it's a suitable match for you. I'll inform you of everything I can find out soon." Richard lay in his hospital bed and couldn't believe what was happening. Now he clearly understood that his condition was so critical that without a donor heart, he simply wouldn't survive. Could it be that he had a small chance now? 2 days later, after all the tests and necessary procedures were completed, it became clear that Richard's heart was a match. The doctor gave the green light for the upcoming operation. In 10 days, everything was ready. Richard underwent a heart transplant, followed by an extensive rehabilitation course. "Well, Richard, you've handled all the procedures excellently," said Dr. Tolmans. "If everything continues this way, I'll start preparing the discharge paperwork." "That's excellent news, Doctor," Richard rejoiced. He had been in the hospital for over half a year, and it was summer. He felt great. Of course, he remembered all the doctor's prescriptions that he would have to follow for the rest of his life. In the first months after the operation, he couldn't get used to the idea that another person's heart was beating in his chest. Days turned into weeks, and Richard began to adapt to his new condition. He felt that he was getting better, could get out of bed without fear, and walk up the stairs independently, things that were forbidden before the operation. Another thought emerged in his mind: to find out who his savior was. Who was the person who gave him a chance at life? Dr. Tallmans initially hesitated to talk about it, but Richard persistently pursued the information, wanting to know who his savior was. Finally, the doctor relented and told him about Michael. Richard listened to the doctor and understood that a young cardiothoracic surgeon's heart beat in his chest. He was a wonderful guy, Richard thought. Mom visited me, worried about me. She still calls every day. Surely, this guy also has parents who are grieving the loss of their son. I must visit them and thank them for this priceless gift. Immediately heading to Bakersville wasn't an option for Richard. It was only at the end of November that he finally managed to sort out all his affairs and undergo a complete rehabilitation. But thoughts of the Fox family never left him for a moment. The heart in his chest worked like clockwork. Perhaps Richard was convincing himself, or maybe it was indeed the case, but he felt that he had become a different person after the operation. He couldn't explain exactly what was happening, but at times it seemed to him that two different people lived within him. For instance, he started experiencing emotions he hadn't felt before. He began contemplating why he didn't become a doctor. His attitude toward life changed somehow. None of this saddened him in the least. On the contrary, he enjoyed discovering something new within himself. It all seemed like an unusual rebirth. Moreover, he really wanted to visit Bakersville. It felt like they were waiting for him, in need of his help and support. In early December, he traveled to Bakersville. He managed to reach the village only by 7 in the evening. He quickly found the Fox house. It was already dark outside. Only the dim light from a lantern illuminated a small area in front of the gates. Carefully closing the car door, Richard approached the gates, which were unexpectedly unlocked. The yard was empty. The snow softly crunched beneath his feet. The same sound echoed from the wooden clogs on a small porch, near which there was a window. Not knowing what to say when entering the room, he decided to catch his breath and gather his thoughts for a moment. Why do I want to meet them so badly, even though I don't know these people? It's as if they're family to me. Richard pondered, feeling his heart pounding in his chest. The heart of the guy who was born and raised in this house. The guy was no more, but the heart remained. Approaching the window, Richard noticed that the homeowners hadn't had a chance to draw the curtains, so he could clearly see everything happening inside the small village house. Two people were talking in the room, and Richard realized that their voices could be heard distinctly. "This is all Gwen's fault for our troubles," said the woman lying on the bed. "If not for her, our son would be alive. Oh, if I had the chance, I'd strangle her with my own hands." "Calm down, Diana, please." The man began to console her. "How many times can I tell you that Gwen is not to blame for the accident? And who was he driving to on that cursed road that evening?" The woman replied, "I'm telling you, if I ever manage to get out of this bed, I'll destroy her. Maybe that's why God punished you, so now you can't move on your own." The man asked, "Diana, stop it. I can't listen to the same thing every evening. Stop talking this nonsense." "It's not nonsense. Not nonsense at all. You'll see someday that I was right," the woman said. "And my legs failed because of Gwen too. I haven't been able to get up from this bed on my own for a year." The woman burst into tears, and Richard understood that he had overheard a conversation between the parents of the young man whose heart he now possessed. He couldn't utter a word after hearing everything. It felt like he had lost the ability to speak for a few minutes. "So Michael's mother is bedridden. Most likely, something happened to her on a nervous basis, and now she can't stand up on her own," Richard pondered. "And she blames someone named Gwen for Michael's death. I wonder who she is. No, I won't leave here until I find out everything. Quietly descending the steps, Richard headed towards his car. He didn't know what to do next after everything he had seen. First, I need to understand what's going on in this house, Richard decided, turning the key in the ignition. Right now, I can't even fathom how these unfortunate people will receive me. Was it worth coming here at all? Lost in his thoughts, the man drove quietly along the village street and didn't notice a pedestrian crossing the road. When the dark silhouette emerged in the darkness, it was already too late. The Toyota hit the person. Due to the abrupt stop, Richard himself got slightly bruised. Jumping out of the car, he rushed to the injured. "Are you okay?" he asked. The injured person lay on the roadside, in the snow, groaning softly. "It seems I've injured my leg a bit," replied the man who reeked of alcohol. "And you, don't you see a person walking on the road?" "I'm sorry. Please. Usually, I'm very attentive. But here, on the village street, I got lost in thought and didn't notice you at all," explained Richard, and suggested the man try to stand up. "Besides, you were working right in the middle of the road. Don't justify yourself. Whatever it is, it's your fault," insisted the man, struggling to stay on his feet. Richard felt that the alcohol in the man's blood hindered him from standing straight more than any injury he might have sustained. "Let me take you to the nearest hospital. You need to be examined to make sure everything is fine," Richard offered and helped the man get into the car. "Don't take me anywhere." The injured man began to resist. "Take me home instead. I've had a bit to drink today. I doubt I can make it home on my own." Richard looked at the man and only now began to realize how drunk he was. A tidy man around 50, he made a rather pleasant impression. "Tell me the address. I'll drive you," Richard agreed. "It's not far, about 200 meters ahead, and we'll be home," explained the man. "By the way, we've been talking for a few minutes now, and we still haven't introduced ourselves. I'm Ed. And what's your name?" "Richard." "Nice to meet you," smiled Richard. "Show me the house where we need to stop." "And here it is." Ed waved his hands. "Stop the car near the garage and come into the house. It's late at night, and you're going somewhere. Come on, stay overnight at my place. Now my wife Melinda will start bothering me, but she won't dare if you're around. Be a friend. Okay." Richard decided to escort his new acquaintance to the house. He really had nowhere to stay overnight, and the nearest hotel was about 20 kilometers away. Besides, he wanted to find answers to the questions about the Fox family, get to know them, and thank them for their involvement in his fate. Of course, they couldn't even guess who received their son's heart. But these people dared to take such a step. Struggling to bring the drunken man to the porch, Richard helped him climb the stairs and then enter the house. "He's drinking again. How much longer can I endure this?" A woman in a colorful robe attacked the man. "It's already night, and he's still wandering around somewhere," expressing her displeasure. The homeowner finally noticed the presence of a stranger in the hallway. "And who are you? Another one of Ed's friends?" she asked angrily. "No, not at all. We just met by chance. How can I explain to you?" Richard didn't know how to explain to the enraged woman the reason behind his unexpected encounter with Ed. "Be silent, woman," interjected the homeowner. "Melinda, this is Richard, my friend, but he didn't drink with me. He doesn't drink at all. But we need to treat him to something. Come on, set the table." "Set the table at this hour?" said the woman. "Yes, at this hour. A man from the city came. We can't let him go hungry on the road, can we? It's better not to let him go at all. Let him stay overnight with us." Ed continued to insist. "Well, if you want it that much," the woman gave in. "I don't know who you are, but I can offer you a spare guest room." Ed, gathering his strength, escorted his guest to the dining room and seated him at the table, where Melinda, after a couple of minutes, placed a meat pie. "I hope we've hosted a decent person in our home," asked Melinda. "Don't worry, I'm just passing through your village, sorting out a couple of matters, and then I'll leave," said Richard. "I have nowhere to stay overnight, so I'd appreciate it if you could provide me with a room. Of course, not for free, but for a certain fee. Whatever you say, I'll pay." Melinda looked at her guest, whom she was starting to like more and more. The man's speech and manners revealed someone intelligent and decent. "Oh, stay just as you are," the woman replied. "And where did you manage to meet my husband?" "Oh, this is quite an interesting story." Ed perked up. "He almost killed me." "Almost killed? How?" Melinda was surprised. Melinda looked young and well-groomed. Her short-cropped hair emphasized her neck. Even in her home robe, she looked charming. Richard detailed the minor accident that happened on a deserted village street, and Ed nodded in silent agreement. When Melinda heard the entire story, she looked angrily at her husband. "So, Ed, if you don't stop drinking, you won't even notice when you end up under the wheels of a car," she addressed her husband. "And you didn't drink at all before the incident with Michael. What changed in your head after that unfortunate incident with the neighbor?" At that moment, Ed began to doze off at the table, so Melinda asked Richard to help her get her husband to bed. Returning to the dining room, Richard pondered the words of the homeowner, and at this point, memories of Michael surfaced. It turns out that Ed started drinking after Michael's death. Back on the street, Richard realized that Ed was a neighbor from Fox. "So, what's really happening here?" Richard wondered. "No, I definitely need to stay in this village and get to the truth." In the dining room, Melinda appeared, sat down at the table next to the guest, and sighed heavily. "This is how we live, Richard," she said. "Ed, my husband, is one of the best farmers in the county, and nobody helped him get on his feet, all by himself, with his efforts. Although our farm is small, Brody products are known for their quality." "Brody?" Richard was surprised. "So, the sausage products under the brand Brody Farm are yours?" "Well, yes, we produce them in small batches, and you can't find them in every store. But connoisseurs of real sausage and cheese know where to find them," explained the woman. "I never thought I'd end up in the house of someone who makes my favorite products. I even try to send packages with your products to my mom, who lives far from here," said Richard. "And your house is wonderful." "Yes, and you can't argue with that," Melinda smiled. "We started building the house after the farms and factories started making a profit. Of course, it's not a 4-story mansion, but in the village, no one else has a house like this. I really like your house. Small, tastefully built. It has everything for a comfortable life," said Richard. "And the food here is just wonderful. Thanks for the warm welcome. So, you must be tired from the journey. Let me show you to your room," Melinda offered. "But first, explain why you came to Bakersville. I also want to know who you are, where you are from, and what you do." "I came from the city. I'm also in business." Richard didn't want to reveal that he is the CEO of a large construction company, so he didn't immediately figure out what to say. "In short, my business is still in the early stages. I want to get into construction. Nothing interesting." "Don't be modest. You give the impression of quite a wealthy and intelligent person," said Melinda. "Well, I've tired you enough with my chatter. You can tell me everything tomorrow." The woman escorted the guest to the guest room. Wishing Richard a good night, Melinda left the room. Richard took a shower, turned off the lights, and approached the window, facing the Fox house. He noticed that despite the late hour, the light in their window was still on. Apparently, they were suffering from insomnia. The longer Richard stared at the house with illuminated windows, the more familiar it seemed to him. It appeared to be an ordinary village house, but something drew Richard there. He couldn't understand what exactly, but he desperately wanted to embrace the people living under that roof. Morning came unnoticed. Richard woke up only at 10 in the morning. Looking out the window, he noticed that the day had long begun, and the weather was wonderful. It was snowing. Jumping out of bed, Richard freshened up and went to the kitchen where voices could be heard. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" asked Melinda. "I decided to bake a pie again. Today it's apple. My daughter Kelly loves them. By the way, she should be arriving soon. Ed opened a beauty salon for her. We wanted her to become a doctor, but she chose a cosmetologist profession. You could say she almost became a doctor. She doesn't come often, about once a month. She called this morning and warned that she's coming." "It's good," replied Richard. "Thank you for the accommodation, and sorry for being persistent. But can I stay a few more days?" "Of course," agreed Melinda. "I'll feed you breakfast now. Come on, eat." Richard enjoyed his meal and watched how skillfully Melinda managed things in the kitchen. The woman was in a cheerful mood, probably because her only daughter was about to arrive. "Richard, you still haven't told me why you came from the city to our village," the woman said, looking at her guest with curiosity. "How should I put it?" Richard pondered, still not understanding what to say to this question. "I'm an entrepreneur. I want to explore the area and possibly build something interesting in your area." "What can you build here?" Melinda wondered. "You have ecology, surrounded by forests and fields, and finally, an agribusiness that produces high-quality meat and dairy products. I would get involved." Richard decided to continue his fabricated story. Melinda pondered. "If you think about it, there's some truth in your words. Why not? And why did your husband start drinking?" Richard asked. "Our neighbor died in a car accident last fall. We weren't particularly close. Still, Ed, my husband, was deeply affected by everything that happened. After that, he started drinking. I tried to reason with him, asked him to go to the city for treatment. But he doesn't listen, does everything his way." "Understood." Richard whispered, finished his tea, thanked her, and decided to take a short walk around the village. He didn't find the homeowner in the rooms or in the yard. He probably went to work in the morning, Richard thought. Walking quietly down the street, Richard reached the store, a small building located in the very center of the village. He knew that this is where all the gossip and conversations in the village gathered. "Hello. Please give me this sausage," he requested, seeing the Brody Farm brand. "Oh, you made a very good choice," said the saleswoman. "I heard that they make this sausage here in Bakersville." Richard started a conversation with the woman. "Yes, right here," continued the saleswoman, appearing to be about 25 years old. "It said Brody who produces it at his enterprise. His daughter, by the way, is my classmate. True, she doesn't consider us people. She doesn't even say hello when she comes home to her parents. Considers herself important, although she's just an ordinary girl like me." "Why don't you like her?" Richard was surprised. "Well, because everything in this life comes easy for people like her. I work day and night in this store, get tired. Meanwhile, Kelly's father opened a beauty salon for her, bought her a car." Understanding that the cause of it all was ordinary female envy, Richard said goodbye to the girl and left the store. "I wonder what Kelly is really like. I haven't seen her once, and I'm already eager to meet such an unusual and interesting person," Richard told himself. He himself didn't know why he bought these products, but it was the first thing that caught his eye in the small store. Approaching the Brody's house, Richard noticed that a man around 60 years old had come out of the Fox house, walked past, and didn't even look at him. That was probably Michael's father, Richard guessed, and felt his heart pounding loudly in his chest. From the man's face, Richard understood that he was very upset about something. On an instinctive level, he understood that something was happening in the Fox family. But what exactly? It was impossible to find out for now. Near the Brody's house, next to Richard's silver Toyota, a red Honda was parked. The man realized that the homeowner's daughter had already arrived. The man entered the house and was immediately surrounded by attention. "Oh, Richard, you are back already," Melinda rejoiced. "And we've been waiting for you." At that moment, a charming girl appeared next to Melinda. Her loose light hair, blue eyes, An enchanting smile probably drove more than one man crazy. Kelly, she introduced herself and extended her hand. Richard. The man replied and smiled back. Is Ed still not here? His question clearly upset the women a bit, although both preferred to pretend that nothing was happening. No, Ed isn't back yet. Probably, he's delayed at work. As always, Melinda answered as calmly as possible. Don't stand there. Come in. I just took a pie out of the oven. Want to treat you. And, of course, Kelly too. The apple pie turned out to be truly delicious. You know, I think I haven't eaten such deliciousness since childhood. He praised the homeowner. Eat, eat, Richard, Melinda rejoiced. Kelly, he only took a couple of pieces, preserving her figure for someone. The girl didn't react to her mother's words in any way. Our Kelly is the first beauty in him, Melinda continued. Probably that's why she can't find a worthy groom. Mom. Kelly interrupted her mother. How many times can I say not to bring up such topics in front of strangers? Maybe Mom just wishes you well. Richard intervened in the conversation. Let's talk about your village instead. I walked along the main street today. People live well here. You have a good store. By the way, out of habit, I bought products from your company. I need to put them in the refrigerator. I'll definitely put them away, Melinda said and disappeared behind the dining room door. Left alone, the young people sat in silence for a while. Kelly was the first to speak. Don't pay attention to my mom, Richard. Sometimes, with her persistence, she can be just unbearable. Better tell me, what do you do? Where do you live? Richard didn't disclose the whole truth about himself. He only mentioned that he recently started a construction business and would like to develop a project with the prospect of implementing it in Bakersville. Well, I think Bakersville is an unnecessary village for anyone, the girl said. Do you really see any prospects for business development here? Why not? Richard asked, catching himself thinking that he was starting to believe in his own words. I, too, do a bit of business. I have a beauty salon. It doesn't bring in a lot of money, but it's enough, the girl said. How long are you staying with us? I don't know yet. Depends on how things go, Richard replied, looking at her attentively. For some reason, despite all her beauty, Kelly didn't really capture his attention. The girl's gaze suggested that she didn't particularly want to return to her parents' home. Kelly, do you visit your parents often? The man asked. About a year ago. I used to come much more often. And now? Kelly unexpectedly fell silent. And now, once a month. There's so much here that reminds me of not very pleasant events. I really don't like Bakersville. Wild people live here. To these words, Richard didn't respond. He just pondered more about the reasons behind her behavior. The head of the family returned home only in the evening, and he didn't join them for dinner. Ed was once again not sober, greeted his daughter coldly, threw a heavy look at her, and disappeared somewhere. Richard increasingly realized that things in this family were not as simple as they seemed. The next day, after breakfast, Kelly invited Richard for a walk. Quickly getting ready, Richard joined Kelly, who was already eagerly waiting for her new acquaintance in the yard. I want to be your guide. After all, you don't know all of Bakersville yet, right? Kelly inquired. I'd be happy for your company. I could use a guide. Richard agreed, immediately feeling Kelly tightly grasping his arm. You don't mind if I hold on to you? The road can be quite slippery in some places, and my shoes aren't exactly meant for long walks. What's the matter? Richard wondered. In the hallway, I saw a couple of splendid women's boots. No way. Let those silly village girls wear them. I won't step out in those for sure, the girl arrogantly replied, glancing at her high-heeled shoes. Once again, Richard found no words on how to react to Kelly's words, so he simply walked silently along the village road. Kelly, do you have friends here? It would be nice to meet them, Richard asked. I don't have any friends here. Had some, but now I don't talk to anyone, the girl replied spitefully. Richard understood that such a conversation was unpleasant for her. After walking a bit more, a person appeared on the road who was undoubtedly familiar to Kelly. The man felt her tense at the sight of him. "Hey, Brian," she dryly greeted. Walking past, the man looked at the girl, nodded, and continued on his way. Richard felt like the stranger's gaze was full of pain, longing, and hopelessness. "Who is that, Kelly?" I thought he seemed profoundly unhappy. Richard decided to share his thoughts. That's Brian," Kelly replied. "Father of my classmate Michael. I thought this person looked very unhappy." Richard sighed. He buried his son just over a year ago. Kelly clenched her fists and took a deep breath. "Gwen, that wretch, is to blame for everything." Richard remembered that they also talked about someone named Gwen in the Fox house, Michael's mother, and now Kelly accused her of the boy's death. He wondered who she was and where she lived. "And who is Gwen?" he asked, stopping and looking closely into Kelly's eyes. "Gwen is a local floozy, always looking for a rich guy to live without problems. Probably dreaming of getting away from her sick mother and moving to the city. She doesn't care about people, lives only for her interests, and she's a monster herself." The girl ranted, unable to stop her venomous monologue. She ensnared Michael, started cheating on him, and that's what ruined him. With all the information he received, Richard felt uneasy. He clearly understood that Kelly hated Gwen. His desire to meet this girl grew with each passing minute. He didn't want to continue the conversation about Gwen, so he began to ask Kelly about the village and its surroundings. Gradually, the girl calmed down. She flirted with Richard, joked a lot, and never let go of his hand. Throughout the day, they couldn't meet Ed again. The head of the family was once again not at home, and Melinda didn't know where he was. "Richard, I've decided to stay here for a couple more days," Kelly said during dinner. "Agree? Without me, it would be boring for you here. I'll brighten up your gray weekdays." "I'm not bored in Bakersville at all. But I'd be glad if you stayed," Richard said. In reality, he wasn't glad at all about the girl's decision to stay. He wanted to figure everything out calmly, without unnecessary drama and questions. Moreover, Richard understood very well that the girl was interested in him and was doing everything to please him. "Richard, what are we going to do tomorrow?" Kelly asked. "I wanted to meet with the head of the village, and I also wanted to talk to Ed, but I can't seem to find him at home," Richard replied. "I can introduce you to the village head. We passed by his office during our work today, remember?" Kelly asked, smiling mysteriously. "Thanks," Richard dryly replied, thanked her for the delicious dinner, and left for his room. The next morning, he decided to get up early to leave before Kelly woke up. However, the girl had already been up for a long time, waiting for him in the dining room. "Good morning, Richard. I thought you'd sleep for at least another hour." "Good morning," Richard replied. "No, business can't wait. I'll get ready now and go to the village head." "Why all this rush? It's only 7:30 on the clock. Mr. Jordan won't show up at his place earlier than an hour from now. So don't hurry. Have breakfast with me." The girl affectionately addressed her guest, whose discomfort was palpable from her words. He had always avoided intrusive people in his life. Richard believed that a man should win a woman's attention, so he didn't like open hints and strange looks from the girl. "Kelly, I can manage on my own. It's not necessary to accompany me," he told her. "Please, stay home and help your mother with household chores." "But," the girl interrupted the man mid-sentence. "I would like to." "Kelly, I said no," Richard replied and left the dining room. Richard was relieved that he managed to free himself from the persistent girl, so he quickly left the yard and headed towards the office of the head of Bakersville. Mr. Jordan was already there. "Good morning," Richard greeted, seeing a man of about 55 behind the desk. "Good morning. I'm Stuart Jordan," he replied, shaking Richard's hand. "I haven't met you in Bakersville before. Who are you, and what brings you here?" Richard introduced himself and began explaining the purpose of his visit. The idea of building a wellness center in Bakersville no longer seemed so absurd to him. "I'm an entrepreneur. I came to your area to implement a project," Richard began explaining. "I've spent a few days in Bakersville, studying your territory, and I'm increasingly convinced that this is an ideal place for a resort. We can establish a facility that would provide care and treatment for the elderly. Do you have people in the village who would need such services?" "Richard, the idea is good, but I can't say anything right away. I least expected that someone would come to me with such a proposal." Mr. Jordan replied. "Yes, I expected such a reaction from you," Richard said. "But agree, it's a good idea. I'll take care of everything. It will take not just a month, maybe even several years before I can gather all the necessary documents. I fully support you. The construction of such a center would provide jobs for local residents. After all, it's no secret that everything in Bakersville relies solely on Brody's agricultural firm. Although, I doubt that this enterprise will survive for long," Mr. Jordan said bitterly. "Why do you think so?" "At first glance, everything seems fine with the enterprise." Richard pretended not to understand what was being talked about. "It's only at first glance. Ed Brody has been drinking non-stop for the past 2 years. He has no sons, and his daughter has no interest in the business. Kelly has completely different views on life," Mr. Jordan said. "We tried to treat him, but nothing helped." "I see," Richard sighed. "In that case, I have one more request. I ask for your help in conducting a small survey in the village regarding the construction of a wellness center. This way, we will find out the opinion of the local population, whether they will support us in this or not. It will contribute to the promotion of our project. I'll be happy to help you with that. You know, today is my day off, so I suggest not delaying and starting right now," Mr. Jordan said. The men prepared all the necessary documents and began to visit houses. Richard, of course, had 2 goals. One was genuinely related to the construction of a wellness center, and the other was to get into the house of a certain Gwen. He didn't know her last name or address yet, but he hoped to find out more very soon. In a small brick house near the store, Richard met an 82-year-old woman. Despite her age, she turned out to be quite lively. She attentively listened to the men and supported their idea. However, when she decided to sign the documents, she couldn't find her glasses. Gwen, find my glasses in the room," she loudly called out to someone. Upon hearing the name Gwen, Richard's heart raced for a moment. He thought he had found the girl. However, a 12-year-old girl rushed out of the neighboring room, brought glasses to her grandmother, and quickly disappeared. It turned out there were several Gwens in the village, but they were either little girls or married women with children. By the end of the day, Mr. Jordan and Richard began to visit the last street in the village. The young entrepreneur had almost lost hope of finding a girl named Gwen. "Well, Richard, we only have a few houses left to visit," Mr. Jordan said cheerfully. 3 families live on this street. Let's visit the Turners. They must be at home." In a small house with many trees in the garden, Richard met a charming elderly woman. "Hello, Gloria," Mr. Jordan said. "How are you?" "Everything is good, thank you," replied the woman, curiously looking at her guests. Mr. Jordan explained the purpose of their visit, and the homeowner reacted positively. "It would be great if a center like that could be built in Bakersville. Even I could turn to it for help. It's not about me. I worry about Gwen. She hardly sees life because of me, and she hardly goes outside. She closed herself in her grief, hiding from everyone." The woman wiped a tear from her cheek and sighed. "Where is your daughter now?" Richard intervened in the conversation. "She went to the store. She should be back soon," Gloria said. Richard carefully inspected the surroundings of the house and immediately noticed the order. Snow-white tulle and peach-colored curtains were tastefully matched to the wallpaper. A small rug lay on the floor, and sofas and armchairs were covered with throws. "Mom, aren't you bored here alone?" A short, pretty girl unexpectedly appeared in the room and looked at the men with embarrassment. "Hello, Mr. Jordan. Is something wrong?" Richard looked at the girl and couldn't take his eyes off her. It seemed to him that he had never met such a wonderful girl. Kind, slightly sad green eyes, curly red hair, and her enchanting smile captivated the young businessman at first sight. "No, dear, nothing is wrong." The woman smiled and explained the purpose of their guest's visit. Gwen listened attentively to her mother, signed the documents, said goodbye to the guests, and went to the kitchen. Richard reluctantly left the Turner's house. He continued to gaze in the direction of their home for a long time. After visiting the last two families, the men dispersed to their homes, agreeing to meet again the next day in the office. Richard spent the night without sleep. The image of Gwen was constantly before his eyes. It seemed to him that he had seen her somewhere before, knew her, and had even been close to her. Of course, he realized that these were just fantasies, but he couldn't shake off his intrusive thoughts. Michael and Kelly's mother spoke so poorly of Gwen. Although Richard would never say that she was a bad person, and that it was because of her that Michael had died. "I need to find out everything about the Turners tomorrow," Richard repeated to himself. It was already 5 in the morning when he finally fell asleep and slept until almost noon. "Oh, Richard, you are late today." Melinda, as always, was in the kitchen. "Kelly and I were waiting for you for breakfast, but you didn't show up. We didn't want to wake you up. We let you rest." "Thank you. I really needed the sleep," he said. "Melinda, excuse me for bringing you so much trouble, but I still have some business left in Bakersville." "Don't talk nonsense," Melinda said. "Honestly, I don't want you to leave at all. And I think Kelly doesn't want that either. You hardly saw her yesterday. She missed you and waited for you until late in the evening. There's a lot of work. I went around all of Bakersville yesterday, collecting signatures from the residents," Richard explained. "Kelly will be back soon. She decided to go to the auto repair shop. She says there's something she needs to check in the car," Melinda said. It was evident that she was very interested in the relationship between their daughter and Richard. Not wanting to continue the unpleasant conversation, Richard declined lunch and went to Mr. Jordan's office. He was met with joy. It was clear that Mr. Jordan was deeply interested in the construction of the wellness center. But today, Richard had different questions for him. "Mr. Jordan, please take my questions seriously and do not discuss them with anyone else," he requested. "The thing is, the Turner family has left a strong impression on me. 2 women, mother and daughter, live alone. I understand that Gloria is seriously ill." By Mr. Jordan's expression, it was evident that his interlocutor was quite surprised by such questions. "Richard, why are you so interested in this family?" he asked. "Just because. I just want to know more about them." Richard didn't elaborate. "Well, okay," Mr. Jordan said. "Gloria worked as a teacher in the local school a few years ago, but her illness did not spare her. She has been suffering from kidney problems for many years. After her husband's death, her condition worsened. Her daughter, Gwen, never leaves her side. She used to sew. More precisely, she used to. After the incident with Michael, they say she doesn't take any more orders." "And what incident, if you don't mind me asking?" Richard inquired. "Michael lived here. He died in a car accident a little over a year ago," Mr. Jordan began. "He was driving home in bad weather at night. They say he was heading to Gwen. Why he chose to drive, no one understood. He usually always came by train. His father used to meet him at the station, but this time he was in a hurry. He left at night in a rented car, drove all night, and in the morning, when he was almost there, he lost control, went off the road, and, you understand, so everyone in the village blames Gwen for Michael's death. Is that why she avoids going outside?" Richard asked. "Yes, Kelly openly went around the village accusing Gwen. I remember trying to console her. Michael's mother supported her. They poured so much dirt on the Turners back then. In the end, she couldn't take it. Diana was paralyzed. Yeah, It's a cheerful place you have here in the village, Richard whispered quietly. And what's Kelly's connection to Fox? Oh, that's a completely different story, Mr. Jordan sighed. There was a lot of talk about that too. They said that Michael and Kelly were dating, and Gwen came between them. They also said that Kelly pursued Michael herself. Who cares now? Michael won't come back, and he was such a promising guy, planning to become a cardiothoracic surgeon, the only son, and he died so young. Yeah, life takes unexpected turns, Richard agreed. I'd like to visit Gwen. Just don't tell anyone about it. Are you, by any chance, falling for Gwen? Mr. Jordan said. Go ahead. But there's something else I need to tell you. Richard had already prepared to leave, but stopped. Richard, I don't know why you decided to get involved in this, but you should know that Gwen was pregnant. She gave birth in May of this year, but she returned from the maternity ward without the baby. They say the newborn had some pathology and didn't survive even a day. These words left Richard uneasy. The more he learned about Gwen, the more he realized that the girl needed help. He didn't know exactly what kind of help she needed, but his heart insisted that something had to be done. The day was cold. Wrapped in the fur collar of his leather jacket, Richard walked to the Turner's house. He still didn't know how to explain to Gwen and Gloria the purpose of his visit. No thoughts came to his mind. Only his heart stubbornly urged him to meet with Gwen. Here is the small wooden house. The closer Richard approached it, the stronger his heart pounded in his chest. He didn't understand whether it was beating with joy or nervousness. He walked through the yard and climbed the steps. The door was unlocked, so he could easily enter the house. It's you, the girl exclaimed, seeing the person who had been at their house yesterday. Hello. Richard greeted the young hostess quietly. Bruises under her eyes, teary eyes, and a tired gaze indicated that something had happened to her. Richard quickly took off his shoes and entered the room, where he sensed the medicinal scent of heart medication. Is something wrong? He asked. Yes. Last night my mom felt unwell. I called an ambulance. The doctors took her to the city. I didn't sleep all night. Only managed to doze off in the morning, and then I missed the bus. Now I have to find a ride to visit my mom. The girl explained. Why look for a ride? I can take you, Richard offered. Get ready. We'll leave right now. I'll be back in about half an hour. Gwen agreed to Richard's offer. They worked out together onto the street. Gwen closed the door and followed the man whom she knew nothing about but somehow felt she could trust. Along the way, they encountered several people. The locals looked at Gwen and her companion with incomprehension and mistrust, but they tried to pay no attention. Here we are, the man said, stopping in front of the Brody house. Turning to the girl, Richard noticed that Gwen turned pale and trembled with excitement. Do you stay in this house? Are you related to the Brodys? She asked skeptically, tears welling up again. No, not at all. Richard began to reassure her. I just happened to end up in this house. A strange story unfolded. Well, let's not talk about it now. Wait for me here. I'll get the keys and try to start my Toyota. Crossing the threshold of the Brody house, the man immediately encountered Kelly. Richard, where are you going? She asked. Kelly, I need to leave urgently for some business, the man said without looking at the girl. I don't have time to explain the reason for my departure, and I don't think I'm obligated to tell you anything. The girl, hearing such a response, was slightly surprised and silently watched as Richard searched for something and then left the house without even turning in her direction. The car didn't want to start in the cold. Turning the key in the ignition and realizing that all attempts were leading to nothing, Richard looked at Gwen and realized that she was freezing. Gwen, we need to go to an auto repair shop, he said. We need to warm up the car. That's the only way we can start it. Is there anyone in your village who can help us with this? He asked the girl. Yes, Gwen nodded. Shane does car repairs. He has a workshop on the next street. We can go to him. Great. Lead me to him, Richard exclaimed. Relieved, Gwen stepped out of the Toyota and headed towards the auto repair shop. In just 15 minutes, they arrived. Shane was not at the workshop. His assistant informed them that he had gone to the city for a few days, and it was uncertain when he would return. Fortunately, he didn't refuse to help, and about an hour later, Richard's car was comfortably parked in the warm workshop. They managed to start the Toyota only at 4 o'clock in the evening. It was already dark outside. Throughout this time, Gwen quietly sat in the waiting room, anticipating when Richard would inform her that everything was okay with the car. "Gwen, we can go now," Richard finally said. Gwen didn't really understand who this person was and why he decided to help her. But for now, those questions were secondary. Right now, her main concern was her mother's health. They reached the hospital without any adventures. The doctors reported that Gwen's mother felt much better after all the necessary procedures. Gwen was able to talk to her mom, who pleaded with her daughter not to visit her often and assured her that she was fine. Gloria asked her daughter to take care of herself and not to worry about her. After noting down the treating doctor's phone number and bidding farewell to her mom, Gwen left the hospital. "Thank you, Richard," she thanked the man. "If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have made it to the hospital today. Mom is better, but I understand it will take her a while to fully recover." "Don't worry, Gwen, everything will be fine," Richard tried to reassure her. "Now, I suggest we find a cafe and grab a bite. With all these worries, neither of us has eaten today." "You eat, but I won't," Gwen declined. "Why?" Richard asked. "You need to eat to preserve your strength." Realizing that resisting was futile, Gwen got out of the car and followed the man to the cafe. The bright hall had almost empty tables. Richard chose the farthest table by the window, helped Gwen take off her coat, and placed an order. Seeing that she struggled with choosing dishes, he suggested something she should definitely try: ratatouille. "You've never tried anything like it." Gwen smiled. "I think you'll like it," Richard said. Dinner was indeed delicious. Gwen ate everything the waiter brought. Green tea with a fruit tart lifted her spirits. "Well, now I see that you feel better. There's even a spark in your eyes," Richard remarked. Gwen smiled in response. "Now we need to head back home," Richard said. "Yes, of course, we should hurry." Gwen agreed and immediately began to gather her things. They remained silent throughout the journey. Richard thought about how he couldn't leave the girl alone tonight, but he didn't know how to tell her about it yet. Meanwhile, Gwen glanced at her new acquaintance and, for the first time in the past year, felt a sense of lightness, perhaps even joy. "Gwen, please understand me correctly," Richard addressed the girl when he parked the car near her house. "I wouldn't want to leave you alone tonight. Don't refuse me a place to stay. I'm sure there's room for me in your house." Hearing such words, Gwen was certainly not prepared. She looked up and carefully examined her new acquaintance. I, of course, don't mind. But what will people say? Many consider me heartless, audacious, and even promiscuous. So, I wouldn't want to ruin your reputation and mine," the girl said. "Gwen, don't listen to anyone. What people say shouldn't concern you. The main thing is, I know you're a wonderful person. I'll leave the car at the workshop. Don't worry. Also, I really ask you to tell me everything about yourself. I want to help because I feel that you need it," Richard said, touching the girl's hand. Gwen knew that it wasn't wise to trust a stranger, but she felt that Richard could be trusted. While Richard was dealing with car issues, Gwen managed to light the fireplace and freshen up. "It's a good thing we had dinner at the cafe," she thought when she discovered the completely empty fridge. By the time the guest arrived, everything at Gwen's was ready. She was just pouring fragrant herbal tea and taking out black currant jam from the pantry when she noticed Richard in the house. "Take a seat at the table," she shyly invited the guest. "Certainly, there's nothing more to treat you with, but warming up after the cold outside is just what we need." Richard gladly took a seat at the table. Somehow, at that moment, Gwen's small house seemed even more welcoming to him. "Now, Tell me everything that happened to you. I didn't just happen to be in Bakersville. There are no coincidences in life. I'm ready to help you, Richard said. Gwen didn't immediately start her confession. Tears flowed from her eyes, and her shoulders trembled with nervous tension. Richard didn't press her. Only after about 15 minutes did Gwen gather her strength and begin to share her story. It all started with meeting Michael. Of course, we were born and raised in the same village, but I never thought there could be anything serious between us. We have a 5-year age difference. At the time we met, he had already graduated from medical school, and I had just finished high school and enrolled in the first year of the history faculty here. It's because my mom got seriously ill, and I couldn't leave her alone. The girl spoke. The summer of last year was the happiest for me. Michael was an amazing person. He gave me so much attention, love, and warmth. We even made plans for the future. We wanted to get married, live in the city, move my mom to our house. But the girl couldn't hold back and started crying again. It was clear that memories of those happy times caused her tremendous pain. For some reason, Michael's mom always treated me very coldly. She didn't want to see me as her daughter-in-law and tried to dissuade her son from meeting me. But Michael didn't yield to her and came to see me. The girl smiled through tears, and then it was time to leave for the city for my studies. We agreed to meet in a month, but for some reason, he decided to come a week earlier. Moreover, he was in such a hurry home that he rented someone else's car. He drove himself and got into an accident, just a little short of reaching home. Since that day, Michael is no more. I don't remember how I survived the first months after all of this. Moreover, for some reason, I was blamed for everything. That Michael rushed to me, resulting in the accident and his death. His mother cursed me, and the neighbor Kelly supported her in everything. I found out about the pregnancy only closer to Christmas. At that time, I was already 4 months pregnant. Rumors spread in the village that due to my lifestyle, I didn't know who impregnated me. But that's not true. The only man in my life was Michael. I gave birth on time, but I didn't see the child. The delivery was difficult. Right after the baby was born, I heard his cry and lost consciousness. And then, Gwen started crying again. This time she cried for a long time. Richard administered soothing drops and hugged her shoulders. Later, they told me that the baby was born with a congenital heart condition and died. I wasn't even allowed to see him. They just said it was a boy. Gwen finished her story, listening to the girl until the end. Richard sat in silence for a while, holding Gwen's hand. It was already 2 in the morning. Gwen settled the guest on the couch, went to her room, and immediately fell asleep. Richard tossed and turned for a long time, trying to find the connection between the events that happened to the girl. In the morning, Gwen woke up earlier than her guest. She prepared breakfast and waited for him to wake up. As soon as he appeared in the kitchen after waking up, he greeted the hostess and sat down at the table. "Gwen, let's try not to get upset today and get to the bottom of things," he said, looking into the tired eyes of the girl. "I thought a lot about everything you told me yesterday. Tell me, do you have any enemies in your village?" "Honestly, I never thought about that," Gwen replied with a sigh. "What do you think about Kelly Brody?" He asked. "About Kelly? I heard that she liked Michael, but I can't say anything more about her. I remember feeling insecure when I found out about it. Kelly is the first beauty in the county. And who am I? Just simple, unattractive. When Michael started courting me, I didn't understand why he suddenly paid attention to me. I even feared my feelings for him. Thought I'd fall in love with him, and he'd play and leave. But Michael was genuine. There are no more like him, and there never will be. Kelly, for some reason, blamed me for Michael's death. I think she did it in a state of stress, needed someone to vent her anger on, and she didn't like me." "Gwen, never speak of yourself like that again," Richard pleaded. "You're the most wonderful girl I've ever met in my life. Believe me, You are beautiful, kind, and radiant. Yes, you yourself don't realize how beautiful you are. Most importantly, your beauty comes from within as well. Do you hear me?" Gwen silently listened to her guest and smiled through tears. "Do you want to ask anything about me?" Richard unexpectedly asked. "You don't know anything about me either." "I do," Gwen replied quietly. "I just haven't found a convenient moment to ask you that question. Initially, I was even afraid of you, but I quickly realized that you're a good person, and there's no need to fear you." "Gwen, I didn't just come here on a whim. I came here following my heart." Richard began to tell about himself. "And when I say following my heart, I mean following Michael's heart." "What does that mean?" "I don't understand anything," Gwen whispered quietly and trembled. "I couldn't find the answer to this question for a long time. But now I know for sure. If it weren't for Michael's heart beating in my chest, I would hardly have ever thought of coming to these places. I felt a strong desire, a longing, as if I was coming home. And I also sensed that there was someone here who needed help, and that person turned out to be you. I found you through the calling of Michael's heart. Now I firmly believe in it." Gwen sat as if in a stupor, unsure of how to react to the man's words. It seemed like she might faint any moment. "How is that possible?" she finally managed to say. "What heart? What does Michael have to do with this? I feel like I'm going crazy right now." "Try to calm down, Gwen," Richard reassured the girl. "The thing is, I was sick, very sick. Doctors gave me no chance of survival. My heart could stop at any moment. But Michael gave me a chance at life. He left me his heart. As I was told, during his lifetime, he mentioned that, if necessary, he could leave his heart as a donor for someone in need. Coincidentally, that person turned out to be me. When I underwent the surgery, I didn't know who the donor was, but I managed to find out about Michael and his family. I learned where his parents lived and decided to visit them to express my gratitude for such a noble gesture. However, I couldn't bring myself to enter their home. From the yard, looking through the window, I saw a sick woman and a grief-stricken man. Unsure how they would react to my presence, I didn't dare intrude into their lives." Gwen listened attentively to the man and then approached him, touching his chest. "Can I listen?" she asked. Richard silently nodded. Gwen leaned against Richard's chest and attentively listened to the beating of his heart. "Oh my God, this is a miracle. If someone told me that I would hear Michael's heart beating like this again, I would never have believed it," she whispered. "How many times have I pressed against him like this, listening to this beat? It's a miracle. Just a miracle." The man gently stroked the girl's curly hair and smiled. He once again realized what a wonderful heart he had received. "Diana fell ill right after Michael's funeral," Gwen explained. "She also blamed me for everything openly, making it a public affair so that everyone in the village would know and make me an outcast. I didn't argue with her because, knowing her character, I understand that it's pointless. But this can't go on, Gwen. We will fight for your honest name. At the very least, I'll do everything possible to let people know that you're not to blame for what happened," said Richard. While the man didn't know the specific actions he should take, he was determined to do everything he could. After breakfast, he decided to visit the Brody family. He still hadn't been able to meet Ed. Where the man disappeared for entire days remained a mystery. Besides, he decided to move in with Gwen. Moreover, the girl was okay with it. Reaching the right house, Richard glanced at the Fox house. The long unattended path near the house indicated that no one had left the house for a long time. Seeing everything, Richard felt a tightness in his chest. For some reason, he felt a strong desire to enter this house and embrace the people living in it. But for now, he had more important matters. Quietly opening the gate, he entered the house and accidentally became a witness to someone else's conversation. "Mom, how can't you understand?" Kelly was saying. "Richard is such a promising fiancé. I'll never find anyone like him again. Who else can I tie my fate to here? No one. And Richard is a successful businessman. He has a lot of money in his accounts. Are you sure it's the person you're talking about? Melinda doubted her daughter. Maybe your internet got everything mixed up. It's hard to mix up something like this. Don't compare this candidate with Michael. Michael was a simple student, although he showed good promise. And Richard, a businessman. Look at what I managed to find out about him. The women fell silent and began to study something on the laptop screen. Indeed, this is our Richard, exclaimed Melinda, and he pretended to be a simple, quiet guy. A budding businessman, he told us. Kelly, you're amazing. We can't miss such an opportunity. And how dare he just walk past your beauty? You know what? We need to set a luxurious table today. We just need to come up with a significant reason. Let's say it's your birthday. We'll toast to it and leave him to sleep in your room. You don't know how it's done. Well, I'll teach you. And the next morning, as an honest man, he'll just have to marry you. Well, you're quite the fantasizer, Mom, Kelly marveled. Although, it's not such a crazy idea. Let's try it this way. But where is he? You know. I wonder where he spent the last night. Maybe he's already found a local bride for himself. The woman worried. We need to find out where he is urgently. I've already found out everything, Kelly said. His car is at the auto repair shop. And he probably spent the night at Mr. Jordan's. They must have become such good friends for a reason. They decided to organize some construction work around here. You know, daughter, I don't know what to tell him when he asks about his father. He wants to see him. And I'm afraid and don't want them to meet, Melinda whispered. Don't say anything. Pretend everything is fine. You better think about how we'll live when I marry Richard, Kelly said, and went to her room. Melinda looked around as if sensing that someone might be spying on them. She sighed and went to the kitchen. Richard hid behind the door and didn't even dare to breathe. Suddenly, he heard stealthy footsteps. Peeking through the crack, he saw Melinda carrying something, looking as if she was afraid someone might notice her. Richard found it strange. So, as soon as the woman disappeared behind the threshold, he came out of his hiding place and quietly followed her onto the porch. Wearing an old coat, Melinda headed towards a small house among other utility buildings in the yard that didn't attract any attention. Richard remained standing on the porch, where he could see everything that was happening. About 10 minutes later, the woman came out of the house, locked the door, and headed back towards the main house. Richard decided not to hide anymore, pretended he had just returned, and quickly entered the house. Richard, you are finally back, the woman said with faint enthusiasm, seeing the long-awaited guest in the hallway. Kelly and I lost track of you. Sorry, I was a bit rude to Kelly yesterday. Just tired. I spent the night at Mr. Jordan's. Richard lied, trying not to reveal his agitation. We've got a lot of work. Did you hear about the signatures we collected in the village? So, get ready. Construction of a wellness center will start in Bakersville very soon. Of course, I heard, said Melinda. Don't stand there. I'll set the table. Let's have dinner. Richard had no desire to eat in this house. However, he decided to stay until night. He was intrigued by the small house that Melinda visited for some reason. There was no chance of getting to it unnoticed during the day, so he planned to carry out his exploration at night. No need to worry about me, he addressed the homeowner. I'm not hungry, although I won't say no to a cup of tea. Melinda led the guest to the dining room and poured some tea. Hearing her mother talking to someone, Kelly entered the room and began flirting with him again. Richard now knew exactly what she wanted, so he tried to pretend he was listening to the girl, although he was constantly thinking about Gwen. The house became quiet only after midnight. Several times, Kelly entered Richard's room, inventing various excuses. Wearing a revealing negligee, she clearly hoped to dazzle the guest with her appearance. But each time, Richard made it clear that he didn't notice the girl's attention at all. He knew that Gwen was worried, not knowing where he was and where he had disappeared. But for now, there was nothing he could do about it. He had forgotten to write down the girl's phone number, making sure everyone in the house was asleep. Richard slowly got dressed and went to the kitchen. He knew that in the small room behind the kitchen, Melinda kept various tools and outerwear that she only wore when working in the yard. The man didn't know where to find the key to the mysterious little house, but he assumed it might be in the coat Melinda wore when going out during the day. His assumptions proved correct. In one of the pockets, he indeed found the key. Quietly sneaking outside, Richard ran to the little house and opened the door. It was warm enough in the dark room. Knowing that turning on the light was unsafe, he used the flashlight on his phone. On a small bed in the corner, he saw a sleeping man. The room reeked of alcohol. On the table, he found almost untouched plates of food and a vast number of liquor bottles. Richard recognized the sleeping man as Ed Brody. "So, this is where your wife keeps you," he guessed. But here's what's strange. If Melinda keeps her husband here to stop him from drinking, then why are these empty bottles here? It seems like the woman intentionally intoxicates Ed. "I don't understand anything." Richard figured that Ed needed saving. He couldn't wake up the sleeping man, so he decided to seek help. He had heard that Michael's best friend was Shane, the owner of an auto repair shop. Just in case, he noted down his number. Richard hadn't met Shane before, so before understanding what was going on, he had to explain who he was, where he was, and what kind of help he needed. 15 minutes later, Shane arrived at the Brody house, and together, the men managed to load the heavily drunk Ed into Richard's Jeep and headed to Gwen's house. The night was restless. Richard spent the entire night talking to Shane, who confirmed his suspicions about Kelly. Kelly always envied Michael for Gwen. She wanted to marry Michael and dropped hints about it. He said, "I won't be surprised if she's involved in my friend's death. Of course, I could be wrong. Let's wait until Ed wakes up. I think he'll tell us a lot." Why else would Melinda be destroying her husband? Reviving Ed turned out to be challenging. The next day, Shane called a local paramedic, and only after several drips and injections did Ed start to come to his senses and grasp his surroundings. "Where am I? Am I still alive or already on the other side?" he asked when he opened his eyes. "You are safe, Ed," Richard reassured him. "Recognize me and Shane." "I don't know you, but I'll recognize Shane," Ed replied. "But how did I end up here?" Richard recounted everything he had learned. Ed listened attentively and sighed. When he saw Gwen behind Shane, he lowered his gaze, sighed heavily, and blushed. "I must tell you everything," he finally admitted. "Gwen, forgive us all. It's not your fault. My daughter slandered you and is willing to do anything for her own purposes." "I don't understand anything," Gwen whispered. "What does this have to do with you? What does this have to do with Kelly?" "You're a kind soul," Ed said. "If only you knew how much trouble my ruthless daughter caused. It's hard to even remember. I became an accidental witness to a conversation between my daughter and my wife, and instead of staying silent, I started accusing them of everything. I shouted that I would tell everyone, and they begged me not to. I didn't immediately decide to reveal everything, started drinking, and then Melinda began drugging me herself, afraid that the truth would come out. Ed, I think we shouldn't remain silent any longer. Your own life is at stake. We are ready to help you, but you have to help us too," said Richard. Ed paused for a moment, took a deep breath, and began his story. "It was right after Michael's death," Ed recounted. "I came home from work, and none of my girls were at home. I only noticed light in the shed by chance. I went to look for them, and became a witness to their conversation. I shouldn't have shown myself to those two bitches. I couldn't hold back and expressed everything I thought about them." What did you hear that evening?" Richard asked. Kelly was telling her mother how she lured Michael to Bakersville. She told him all sorts of nonsense about Gwen, and he either believed it or not, but he drove he that night. Kelly is responsible for Michael's death. Indirectly, of course, but she's to blame. Melinda supported her in everything, tried to convince everyone that her daughter hadn't done anything wrong. Even Michael's mother, Diana, was in cahoots with Kelly. They together concocted some dirty story about Gwen, manipulated various photos. Kelly reached out to an acquaintance of hers who created photos of Gwen allegedly hugging and kissing some guy. She probably sent those to Michael. Why did she need all this? Gwen asked quietly. Naive you are, Gwen, sighed Ed. Kelly, my daughter, has been in love with Michael since school, but he never paid attention to her, so she was infuriated. She set a goal for herself to win him over. Diana and Kelly destroyed Michael. It turns out they didn't expect things to take such a turn, resulting in his death because of them. After all that happened, Diana became paralyzed. I would have never thought that Diana is capable of such foolishness. She's a mother. She should have thought before pushing her son into something like this, said Gwen. She loved Michael so much. That crazy love of hers didn't lead to anything good, explained Ed. So, they are both indirectly responsible for Michael's death. Of course, they never admitted their guilt, but instead, they smeared you with mud. Do you remember how they worked around the village, saying that you killed Michael with your infidelity? That was their way of comforting themselves. Kelly hates you so much. She can't get over it. When I heard all of this, I started scolding her, and Melinda defended her daughter. She begged me not to tell anyone about what I heard. I started drinking because of all this, and Melinda didn't try to stop me. She started giving me alcohol herself. And when I had my binges, she locked me in the summer house and brought drinks along with food. So, I was quietly dying at the hands of my own wife. Melinda dreamed her whole life of marrying Kelly off to a promising guy. Apparently, they both liked Michael. Listen, said Richard. What if Kelly stole Gwen's child? Knowing all this, I won't be surprised anymore. We need to visit the maternity hospital where Gwen gave birth and try to find out everything. How old should the baby be by now? Gwen sat down in surprise. Her hands were trembling. I gave birth to my son on May 26, she replied. He would have turned 7 months soon. For some reason, I'm sure the baby is alive, said Richard. The next day, Richard and Gwen went to the maternity hospital early in the morning. He couldn't imagine the commotion that occurred at home when Melinda didn't find her husband in his place the next morning. The women immediately guessed that Richard had helped Ted escape. They didn't know the true reason for his actions, but were deeply frightened. Kelly hurried to leave for some reason, while Melinda stayed home alone, not understanding what to do next. At the maternity hospital, Richard decided to talk to the head, but the doctor was not available. In the duty room, a young nurse was sitting, jotting something down in a journal. Excuse me, but we would really like to talk to someone from the staff who delivered babies 7 months ago. The man addressed the nurse. Many people worked here at that time, the nurse replied. Not much time has passed since then. What specifically interests you? We are interested in the fate of a child born on May 26 of this year. The mother was told that the baby died, but no evidence was provided to her, explained Richard. But she should have received the relevant documents, the girl said in surprise. If that's the case, what doubts could you have? Doubts have arisen. We have doubts, Richard said thoughtfully and stepped aside. Upset, Gwen stood nearby, nervously biting her lips. We are unlikely to get to the truth, she whispered. If a crime was committed, we won't be able to uncover it now. Don't despair right away, Richard replied. Let's go outside and think about what to do next. They hadn't even left the maternity hospital when they saw Kelly approaching the entrance. The girl was not in a good mood and seemed to be in a hurry. And here is the evidence that we are on the right track, Richard told Gwen, hiding her behind a cupboard in the corridor. He did it just in time. A few more seconds, and Kelly could have seen them, jeopardizing the entire plan. Kelly, with a frightened expression, asked something from the duty nurse and rushed down the corridor to the head's office. Richard knew for sure that she stopped right next to that office because he had recently stood there himself. Approaching Kelly would be too risky, so Richard continued to wait, hiding behind the cupboard. Gwen stood beside him, also silently waiting to see what would happen next. Kelly made several calls and didn't move away from the doors at all. Soon, a female doctor appeared in the corridor, opened the office with a key, and invited Kelly inside. The women talked for about 20 minutes. Richard desperately wanted to know what they were discussing during that time. Kelly left the office in a nervous state, started her car, and drove away. Now there are no doubts. Kelly is definitely involved in the case of your child, Richard told Gwen. We urgently need to figure out what to do next. They stepped outside. Gwen sighed and burst into tears. She couldn't believe that out of jealousy and anger, Kelly could be so cruel to her and her child. At that moment, another woman exited the maternity hospital doors. She was in a bad mood, talking loudly to herself and scolding someone. Don't worry, you'll regret what you've done to me, she said, glancing angrily at the maternity hospital windows. I know the secrets of this institution more than you all think. Richard didn't hesitate and approached the woman. Has someone offended you? He asked her. As it turned out, the woman was not entirely sober. You see, our head doesn't like that I came to work drunk. Let him find someone to replace me who would agree to work for such a salary. And I've been working here for 10 years. Complained the unknown woman about the head of the maternity hospital. You've been working here for so long. Richard was pleased. You know, we really need your help. Of course, we'll reward you. The woman immediately understood what was being discussed and looked at the man and the woman with curiosity. I remember you well, she suddenly said. You gave birth here 6 months ago. You had a difficult delivery. Yes, that's right, confirmed Gwen. Let's go somewhere away from here. There's a cafe beyond the road. We can sit there and talk about everything. The woman didn't object and gladly agreed. People like me are not respected anywhere. They think we are not worthy of any respect. She continued on the way to the cafe. Sometimes things happen in the maternity hospital right before my eyes. Apparently, they think I'm so foolish that I understand nothing. They took a seat at a table in the cafe, ordered lunch for the woman, and waited for her story. At first, I didn't suspect anything. The woman continued. You had a difficult delivery. Everyone was running around. Only Dr. Rognan was calm. But you gave birth to a boy. I saw them take him to the newborn unit. As far as I know, the baby was born completely healthy, and then they say the infant died. Even I didn't believe it right away. When you were discharged, I was still thinking about that case, and then I noticed that in the unit with the newborns, there seemed to be one who had been born 2 weeks ago. I kept an eye on him, but of course, I didn't ask anyone. I knew my curiosity would lead me astray. And then I see Dr. Rognan handing over a baby to an unfamiliar woman in the backyard in the evening. She handed him over, crossed herself, and went back to her office. I immediately understood that she either sold or gave away that abandoned baby to an orphanage. And why were you fired today? Did they give you any explanation? Gwen asked with a trembling voice. I didn't understand it myself. I just came to work, and Dr. Rognan fired me. She's angry herself, her eyes wide as if she's afraid of something, explained the woman. It seems pretty clear to me, Richard guessed. We saw Kelly at the maternity hospital today. She obviously figured out that we already know a lot, so she decided to visit her old friend and warn her. I wonder how much Kelly paid her to get rid of the baby. She's insane. And what was the point of all this? Michael won't come back. Apparently, she hated you so much. Thanking the talkative woman, The young people rewarded her for her help and left the cafe. "We need to visit Dr. Rognan urgently." The woman wasn't expecting guests and was chatting on the phone about something. Seeing Gwen, she paled and lowered her eyes. "I knew you would come back," she whispered quietly. "Dr. Rognan, we want to know everything about Gwen Turner's baby. Resisting is pointless. If you don't tell us everything, we will go to the police today." The doctor listened to Richard, realizing there was no way to retreat anymore. "I don't know why I agreed to the persuasion of that crazy woman. Probably the money she promised blinded my judgment. She said that no one would find out anything, that the baby's mother is unmarried and in poverty. She said, since then, I've lost my peace and sleep. I don't know how Kelly lived all this time, but I felt bad. Guilt tormented me, and fear, endless fear, and the dread of a prison cell. I still haven't touched a penny from the account. It turns out I can't use money obtained dishonestly." "So what actually happened?" Richard said. "You delivered Gwen's baby yourself. Where did the child go afterward? Just don't say he died. We know perfectly well that you handed him over to someone else." "Yes, I'll tell you everything, the whole truth," Dr. Rognan said with tears in her eyes. "The child is in an orphanage. We made it look like the mother abandoned him. As far as I know, no one has adopted the boy to this day." The woman wrote down the address of the orphanage on a piece of paper. Richard started the car, and they rushed to the city with Gwen. Since Gwen learned the truth about her baby, a month has passed. It took several weeks to process all the documents and bring Adam home. That's what the workers at the orphanage named the boy. Kelly and Dr. Rognan were arrested pending trial. During the investigation, Kelly confessed to bribing Dr. Rognan, the chief doctor of the maternity hospital, to make a certificate of the baby's death and send him to the orphanage. She did it solely out of revenge, believing that Gwen hindered her personal happiness. Melinda knew nothing about her daughter's machinations with the newborn and refused to believe in everything that was happening. She had indulged her daughter's whims all her life, unaware of the harm it was causing. Even her husband became unnecessary when the threat of exposing Kelly arose. Richard helped transfer Gwen's mom to the city hospital, where they started preparing her for a costly operation that would allow her to live a full life. Gwen was happy. She immersed herself in love and tenderness for her little one and was infinitely grateful to Richard for everything he had done for her. Moreover, she knew that not only Richard was by her side, in whom she fell in love more and more each day, but also the warm and loving heart of Michael, the man from whom she bore a child and loved with all her soul. One evening, in the small village house, Gwen decided to have a conversation. Little Adam was already asleep, so she could talk to Richard without any disturbances. "Richard, can't you bring yourself to meet Michael's parents?" she asked. "In early December, when I first came here, I wanted to meet them precisely," Richard replied. "But now, with so much that has happened, I don't even know if it's worth it." "It is. Of course, it's worth it," the girl whispered. "Stop by tomorrow. Explain who you are. I think they will be glad to see you." Richard did just that. Brian and Diana didn't immediately understand why Richard came to them. But when he explained who he was, the elderly couple cried and couldn't calm down for a long time. "Darling, may I listen to your heart?" Diana asked. "I've suffered for so long, blamed Gwen for everything, knowing very well that I was to blame for it all." Diana pressed against Richard's chest and listened for a long time to his heartbeat. Her son's heart. "Diana, Brian, you should be happy," Richard said. "You have such a wonderful grandson. Gwen thought for a long time that he died right after birth, but he was found. Adam is such an amazing boy." They eagerly awaited Gwen's visit. She came on the same day with her son. Diana tearfully apologized, kissed Gwen and her grandson, and didn't want to let them go. A year passed. Little Adam was growing up with his mom and dad. He had 2 grandmothers and a grandfather. After meeting with their grandson, Diana quickly recovered, gradually began to stand and work with her husband's support. Richard literally replaced Michael for them. He helped repair the house, constantly visited. Ed Brody took charge of his agribusiness, becoming Richard's right hand in the construction of the wellness center. Richard did not abandon his idea. He gathered all the necessary documents, and construction was supposed to begin. Kelly and Dr. Rognan received a decent sentence for their schemes. One warm summer evening, when Adam was already asleep, Richard approached Gwen and smiled. "My beloved Gwen, don't you feel like something is missing in our life?" he asked. "Something missing?" Gwen wondered. "I have everything I need. You're here, and I don't need anything else. I am also happy with you. You are the best, most beautiful, and charming girl in the world. And I really want you to be my wife," Richard finally said. Gwen stood in front of her beloved, saying nothing, just smiling and quietly crying with happiness. "I do," she whispered and embraced him. She also discreetly glanced at the sky, believing that after Michael's death, he became her guardian angel, that he directed this wonderful man towards her to make her truly happy. "Thank you. Thank you for everything," she said quietly. At that moment, it didn't matter whether these words were meant for Richard or Michael. Gwen thanked life for everything that happened to her, for all the trials she had to go through, endure, and receive the real gift of